Okay, so I'm Dan Ashby, Director of Engineering at a company called Ada Health, and I'm going to talk about quality. I like my talks to be quite interactive as well, so I'm going to actually start with a question. Now, this question might sound odd. It's quite odd to hear a question like this, but go with it, roll with it, okay? What's the quality of your shoes? What's the quality of your shoes? So everyone's wearing shoes. What's the quality of them? How would you answer that? What's the first thing that you're thinking about? Comfortable? Yeah? Durable? Colourful? Design? Yeah. Long-lasting, yes, a bit of that durability. Environment friendly, sustainability. Waterproof, yep. Okay, let me ask a different question this time, because all of those questions are around that emotive experience of the shoe and the quality attributes that you deeply care about around your shoe. But let me reword this question. Are your shoes correct? Oh, that feels even weirder, doesn't it? What do you mean, shoes being correct? But you do have requirements for your shoes, your shoe size, the shape of the shoe, the purpose of the shoe. Are they the correct shoes for a specific purpose, like going hill walking? You need the correct style of shoes for hill walking. So you do have requirements, so it's still a viable question. Yes, they're correct, or no, they're incorrect. But what's funny with things like shoes or any arbitrary object is we think more about that experiential aspect of quality before we think about correctness. But when we think about building software, it's the opposite. What's the quality of your software? People tend to answer that first and foremost by saying, it's correct, it meets all the requirements, it's really high quality because it meets all the requirements. And then when pressed a little bit more, we then start to think about, but is it good? It might be functionally correct, but is it a good experience for people? Now, with shoes and with software, I could press even more into that question. What else? What else do you consider quality? Eventually, we'll also get to the answers around value and worth. I spent so much in these shoes that were so expensive, but I wear them every day, right? We'll also start to get into the realms of subjectivity, right? These shoes are Vivo Barefoots, the same ones that you see in the picture, right? They're barefoot shoes. You can really feel the ground when you walk. It's very difficult to run in them. Some people hate these shoes. They hate the experience of barefoot shoes. They're quite uncomfortable. Some people will love them and can never wear any other type of shoe other than barefoot shoes. So subjectivity as well. So that question primes this talk, right? I want to talk about how I view quality and my view on how testing relates to quality. I want to talk about thinking about quality and testing beyond software. So I've got a model that I'm going to present around 8 different perspectives of quality across an entire SDLC. And then I'm also going to talk about your role in testing and quality as well, and evolving towards this topic of quality engineering. I'm sure a lot of people have heard that term before. I'm going to present a definition and talk about how your role relates to that as well. Okay, so an even harder question, what is quality? I'm not mean. I don't need answers to this, because it took me about 8 years in my career to actually properly formulate a response to this question. It's a very hard question to answer. But we can look at various different definitions, right? So I'm not going to read all these out, but the sources, I've got the dictionary.com, I've got Wikipedia, where it's looking at the ISTQB definition of quality. I've got standards from ISO, and I've got some community members and the quality communities, their definitions as well. I'm not going to read these out, but I'm going to hone in on specific words, right? So we've got value to some person, and over here, who matters. Conformance to design, or that software works or correct. Conformance to requirements. We've got that grade of excellence, or fineness or superiority, right? Now, when I put this in the slides, it popped. Do you see the 3 categories? For me, it just popped right out at me. There's this lens from the dictionary of that excellence, that grade of goodness. There's also the correctness aspect, conformance to requirements. And then there's also this lens on value, right? Now, it took me, I said, 8 years to formulate how I talk about quality out of a 20-year career. But I recognize that looking at these definitions independently only told one part of a bigger picture, right? Which is all three of these aspects coming together. So the way that I prefer to talk about quality is that it consists of all three of these things. So when I'm talking about quality throughout the rest of this talk, I'm relating it to that level of usefulness or that value or worth of something, that level of correctness in terms of meeting those expectations, and then that scale of goodness as well, that emotive experience of something. Okay, and when we talk about quality across these three lenses, it makes it more, I'd say, easier to a degree to actually talk about the quality of anything. So not just software. What's the quality of the last conversation that you had at the break? Was it good? Was it valuable? Did you learn? Was it correct? The stuff that was being said, was it factually correct? The information that you were sharing? Was the quality of this conference? Now, we're on the start of day one, so it's hard to answer right now, but by the end, you'll be able to formulate your thinking of the quality of the conference. Was it a good conference? Did you enjoy the experience? How good was it? You can talk about that. Was it correct? The talks that you heard, did you agree with them? Did they fit with your beliefs and biases and opinions? And did they break your beliefs and biases and opinions in some way? Were they valuable? Is the conference worth the money that you've spent to come here and see these talks? And is it valuable to your organization that you can go back and make some changes? Quality across all three matters, right? And then, of course, there's the product that you're creating within your companies. What's the quality of that? So when it comes to testing, there's lots of debates in the industry about what testing is. I'm trying to simplify it down here and simply say testing is just a means to assess quality. And then, of course, to expand on that, testing is assessing the correctness, goodness, and usefulness of your products, right? And we already have different testing approaches that align nicely to this. So scripted testing, where we have either test cases that's done in a manual way, or the automated tests that we write revolve around that scripted testing way of assessing correctness with a certain expectation that we have, and it's pass or fail, true or false, correct or incorrect. But we also have the exploratory testing approaches and methodologies that help us assess those unknowns and unexpectations and think beyond that correctness lens into the realms of that scale of goodness and that lens on value and usefulness. So we already have these approaches, right? So when it comes to assessing quality beyond software, this is where we're still using those approaches, but we're kind of branching our thinking beyond testing a tangible product that's in front of us. Now, to help me explain this, I'm going to strip things back to the idea, all the way back to the very beginning of a piece of software. All software starts with an idea, and whether that's an idea to solve a problem or generate revenue or whatever, we all start with a small piece of information that forms that idea. We tend to put processes around that idea. We communicate. We might use three amigos or the power of three to bring different perspectives into the idea. We collaborate. We have processes like behavior-driven development, and we can test that idea, right? And then we have outputs from those conversations and those collaborations. We create our artifacts like user stories and epics and acceptance criteria. We have models that we create, business process diagrams or risk maps or mind maps. We have those feature files if we're using BDD. And then we use those artifacts as an input to our core activities, our development, our design, our testing, our support, the ops side of things, the architecture side of things, our automation scripts, and the processes around that. And then, of course, we have various outputs to that as well, right? We have our code that we write. We have our reports that we create around that. our testing artifacts, our feedback that we get from customers and users, lots of different outputs that we have from those activities, right? And each layer here, we can ask that question of, what's the quality of this? What's the quality of your idea versus what's the quality of your processes around that idea? Your communication around that? Now, Ada is a fully remote organization, and we have some communication challenges sometimes because we're remote. So we have to create the spaces and have that lens on the quality of our conversations that we're having, but not just the quality of our conversations, but the quality of our relationships across teams in that remote working context. So we then have to inject space to build the relationships from that social dynamic so that we can improve the quality of our conversations that we're having around the ideas that we've got. Everything plays a part. And then, of course, the artifacts that we create, how good are our user stories, right? How ambiguous are they? How much assumptions are being made based on the words that we're using to write those user stories and epics and acceptance criteria? Everything, the quality of all these things dramatically impact the quality of the product that we build from using those things, right? So everything's interrelated. So each layer of this sort of explosive bubble, you can have that lens on quality. So I was working at eBay at the time, and I was trying to have these conversations around the quality of all these different things, and it wasn't quite clicking. So I created a model to help me explain this in a way where I'm talking through the SDLC. Now, this is a very high-level SDLC, the grey text at the top. All I'm talking about is 3 layers: the ideation, the implementation, and then that sort of software and production support and maintenance. So that's the top. And then along the left-hand side, we've got the different perspectives to different people. So quality from that external lens for our users and our customers' perspectives. Quality from an internal lens from the team's perspective, the company and the organization's perspective. And then I've got these 2 things at the bottom where I'm looking at team attributes, the quality of our team attributes, and then the org attributes. So let me step through these one at a time. So when I'm thinking about external quality, from that ideation perspective, it's really coming from that perspective of our ideas relating to those wants and needs from our users. What problem are we trying to solve from their perspective? And contrast that with the implementation side relates to that experience of them using the software. And contrast that to the support and maintenance side, where we have things in production that we should deeply care about around supportability, maintainability, and the opportunities and mechanisms for customers to seek support and get that support and give feedback as well. Contrast that to the internal lens, right? When we're thinking about the ideation, we also have to have that lens on how good is that idea, how valuable is that idea, not just for the users, but for the business. And sometimes they can conflict, right? And likewise with the implementation, there's a lot related to our software products that the user doesn't see, right? All the back-end side of our software, we should care about the quality of that as well, the quality of our code. And then in that support and maintenance side, this is relating to things like our observability, our monitoring and alerting, our incident management processes for how we actually support production software, right? Our pipelines and our processes there. We can have a lens on that as well. When it comes to team quality, this is what I was saying around the team attributes and the team's ways of working. And all of this stuff actually impacts everything above. And one of the nice things that we did in eBay was we built dashboards that showed the leading and trailing quality indicators and how if we improved some of these team processes and the culture within the team and our skills and abilities and maturity, how that impacted our software. And we could show trending on that as well. So we had the evidence that improving a process or like pairing or BDD or stuff like that, how that actually impacted the quality of our product as a trailing indicator. But all of these things impact throughout the SDLC as well, like how we communicate and collaborate, those sort of knowledge transfer and conversations that we can have, and that culture that we build of working together in that way impacts our ideas just as much as it impacts how we implement. And of course, the processes around that as well. And underpinning all of this, which is, so some people might be aware of that sort of team lens, but what's normally missing in an organization is how the quality of the organizational structure can impact the teams, right? And the culture of the teams themselves. So this is things like that holistic company culture, the values and principles, that support structure from the leaders in the organization. If it's not there, it's going to hinder the quality of the team culture, the way that the team operates and the product subsequently. So it's more that holistic view. But things like how you recruit, the diversity within the organization, your internal community spaces that you have to grow those social dynamics and that sort of cross-team and cross-org learning together, right? That all plays a part in how the teams operate together, and that plays a part in how they build the software and test it. There's also another lens on this around proactive quality versus reactive quality, and it's too common for companies to solely work in a reactive way. We build something, then we test it, then if there's problems, we resolve those problems. And all of that sort of problem resolution, that's reactively improving quality. But if you look at that model holistically, and we think about the quality of the ideation, the quality of our ideas and our artifacts that we're creating, the quality of our processes and communication and helping us build software, that actually allows us to prevent a lot of problems in our implementation. If we can refactor our idea so that it's less ambiguous and more understood, and if we can refactor those requirements, however they're written, to be less ambiguous, to be more thoughtful, to be a little bit more fuller in terms of that acceptance criteria as well, that helps us prevent those problems. So that there's a lens on proactive and reactive quality there as well. Now, a reminder, testing is assessing quality, right? So another thing that I wanted to do with this model was actually overlay some of the different testing activities that we hopefully already do within our organization, just to make it more explicit that there are things that we can do already or do already around testing the ideas and those artifacts and those designs and wireframes. And when we think about that sort of ideation side from that external quality perspective, we can interview customers. Goiko was saying in his talk previously about sitting behind a customer and watching what they're doing and getting that feedback, right? That should inform our ideas going forward as well. We can do that sort of risk analysis and risk mapping from that customer lens as well. We can involve them in that. And there's also often a lot of UX research and things like that as part of that. But from an internal perspective, this is where we can look at things like A/B experimentation from that idea perspective. We can look at things like payback plans for tech debt and quality debt, right? And be more proactive with factoring those in to the ideas that we're creating for evolving our products. We can look at the business opportunities and work with the business development teams more directly and those opportunities and how it will allow us to evolve our ideas in a much more cohesive way for the business. Contrast that to implementation from that external view. This is where we're looking at the potential of the stuff that we're already doing. We're exploring exploratory testing around designs and the operational software. We've got those scripted tests around that correctness lens as well. We do that already. And in the internal side, hopefully we're already doing things like code reviewing, which I would class as an exploratory testing activity as well. We're not just checking that the code is correct, but we're exploring risks and unknowns and scalability and maintainability and understandability of the code as well as part of those code reviews, so that's exploratory. But we also do the same with architecture models and looking at those integration points, right? And then in production, we've got that sort of those processes around incident management and customer support, where we can look at those processes and investigate them and look at the quality of that. We can look at our feedback mechanisms there, or contrasting that with internal. We can look at the observability solutions that we've got. How are we actually observing production? Is that good enough? Is it valuable? The tools that we're using. And then, of course, our pipelines and stuff like that as well. And then from that team lens, of course, we can test our processes, right? We kind of do that already if we're like, oh, stand-ups suck. Why don't we just change things a little bit to bring a different perspective and try and improve the quality of our stand-ups, right? We might look at other sort of meetings that we have. Everybody right now is on this mission to reduce the amount of meetings, right? Why? Well, probably because the amount of meetings that we've got are affecting the quality of the work that we're doing, right? So we're perhaps just using different language around this. And then how we measure and report on things as well. And then at that org level, this is probably more rare, but we can test our values and principles. We can challenge the leadership in terms of the support that they're bringing and how close they actually are within the teams, and bring them a bit closer so that there's more understanding so that they can support better. Looking at morale more thoroughly. I know companies, perhaps since the pandemic, have been doing a lot more morale surveys to have a finger on the pulse in terms of how people are actually feeling. And then that affects that sort of team dynamic perspective, and of course the products that we're building as well. So there's already a lot of testing activities here. If there's some that you see that you aren't doing, I would encourage exploring those, bringing those in, the opportunities to bring those into your companies, because it will dramatically affect the product that you're building. Okay. So there's another lens here around that proactive versus reactive thing, right? So the information that we obtain from the testing. Testing is around uncovering information, right, predominantly. It's not constructively building, it's more destructively thinking about how things might fail and uncovering information around those risks from these different perspectives. And the information that we uncover earlier around the ideas, the designs, the artifacts, just helps us to improve those trailing quality indicators related to our testing here. The stuff that we discover there can actually be used as an input to guide what we test over here as well. Now, coming to that question, can you measure quality? Is anyone measuring quality right now? How are you doing it? Metrics? What metrics? User experience metrics? Okay. Yep. So we have to ignore the quality at the MVP level. So potentially. But as you scale up, you have to take care of the metrics of user experience. Yeah, I mean, so for those that couldn't hear, there was a point raised around an MVP and whether we could be more relaxed and ignore the quality lens of an MVP and then build beyond the MVP to factor the quality lens in. Potentially depending on your context, right? Ada is a medical device, so we certainly can't. We have to deeply care about quality because our product could harm people, right? And we're regulated as well. It may change. Maybe yeah. You take care of the quality, but you can be unhappy with the result of the metrics. Well, this is the thing, right? Across these different perspectives, some might conflict, and you'll prioritize some over others. So in the context of a medical device, we deeply care about the accuracy of, we are an AI medical device, right? So it's an AI-driven health assessment application. So we deeply care about the accuracy of the results, right? We deeply care about that sort of experience, because if someone's perhaps, as an example, if someone's using our app because they've got mental health issues and the experience is really bad, that might trigger something that causes their mental ill health to deepen, right? That experience could make people feel worse. So we have to care about stuff beyond correctness as well, and beyond just thinking about is it accurate, but that medical experience. Yeah, yeah. I was referring to some kind of startups like Jump, etc. Yeah. The context matters, right? For sure. But some people really struggle with this question because quality is so subjective, right? Now, the way that I would encourage that we get around this is thinking about intersubjectivity. So there's a really nice story around the elephant, the 8 blind men and an elephant. And if people haven't read it, there's a Wikipedia link, you can read about it. There's 2 different versions of this story, though. One is around, so the idea is that the blind men, they're all blindfolded, they're touching different parts of the elephant, and they can't reach agreement about what it is, right? So the man at the side saying, it's a wall, and the man at the tusks is saying, it's a spear, right? It's a rope with a tail. And they only have their perspective. And in one version of this story, they all end up coming to blows with each other, and they can't reach agreement because it's too subjective. I don't really like that version. I prefer the other version, which is they empathize with each other, and they actually take turns going round and experiencing what other people are experiencing. So the man that's saying it's a wall then steps to his left. Oh yeah, that feels like a tree as well. Yeah, that does feel like a spear. And they experience it holistically. And they walk each other around together through collaboration. And in that version, it talks about intersubjectivity, right? So intersubjectivity is essentially when we're saying we have subjectivity, but we put communication and collaboration around it to reach that sort of consensus or agreement, right? From a social science perspective and a psychology perspective, it simply means agreement. Shared opinions through consensus. So we can work towards intersubjectivity, and we do this a lot for other topics that we work with in our workplace, right? If anyone uses a tech radar, for example, and we're going through these stages of a tech radar, we reach an intersubjective view, right? We take everybody's opinions in, or if people have RFC, request for comments documents, you collect people's contexts and comments, and you build an intersubjective view, and you make decisions based on that intersubjective view, right? So we simply can just do the same with a lens on quality. There's another model that helps describe that intersubjective view, which is Jeff Patton in his book called User Story Mapping. He's got this model where people think that they agree, but actually they're all on a different page when they model it out, and then they reach that agreement through that collaboration. So how to actually display a measure of quality? What we did at eBay, this is a mock design of what we put as a dashboard in eBay that I've also used in other organizations. On the left-hand side, we've got those leading quality indicators against processes that we had put in place. Some are red, some are amber, some were green. Apologies for colorblind people. I'm colorblind myself, but these red and green tones work for me. So in the middle and on the right-hand side, we've also got trailing quality indicators, but one is more around the sort of operational side, that internal view, and one is more around the sort of business view and the customer view. But what we used to do was we used to do these experiments over time, and we'd improve something over on the left-hand side. How do we get this from red to amber? And we'd have that intersubjective view, and we'd work towards helping improve that thing from red to amber or from amber to green. And then we'd watch over time how it affects the data on the right-hand side. And there was some things that we did that didn't impact the data on the right-hand side at all. So then we were like, okay, well, maybe we experiment the opposite way. Do we really need that process? Is it really helping? And then we'd drop certain things and we'd see that it made no difference. But some things, we tweaked the slightest thing and it made such a dramatic difference on the right-hand side as well. So experimenting with that view holistically across the processes. So that was the sort of purple box that I had and how it impacted the product metrics, right? The business metrics and the customer verbatim as well. Very valuable. But that's one way of doing it. There's loads more. There's another example, I don't have it in my slides, but we looked at that sort of intersubjective view on our confidence in quality versus the complexity of the software, and we just plot features. So this is super complex, but we've done enough assessment of the quality that we're high in confidence. So therefore, it fits in this zone, we feel like we don't need to do more on this, it's good to go. Versus, this is super complex, but we haven't done as much as we think we could have, so this is in a zone where we need to do more. Versus, it's super simple, and we've done enough. We think we've done enough, and we're fairly confident, so it's good to go, but we'll keep an eye in production to see how it affects things. We might have that reactive lens on it versus proactive lens. I can share that. If you reach out to me, I'll share that model as well. Okay, number 3, what's your role in testing and quality? So I used the 8 perspectives model, but this time with an overlay of different roles that we have within our organizations. Most of us sit in that middle box, right? We take the requirements, we might be involved in forming those requirements, but we're not really involved in the ideas. We're not really involved in the user research, and the customer experience folk deal with that, or designers. And we're not really involved in the sort of processes of incident management. We might be involved in being on call to support the work that we're building, but those processes are normally supplied, right? So most of us that's our comfort zone, that implementation box. But we still have both that external view and the internal view, hopefully, right? But where we should be is spanned throughout, right? We can bring so much value being involved in that left-hand side, being involved with the customer conversations, thinking about the ideas. We can bring that different perspective in. Whether you're a tester or a developer, you bring that, if you're a developer, you bring that constructive lens into how you might build something as part of forming those ideas. Easier ways to do things, it might change the idea slightly. And if you're a tester, you'll bring that destructive lens. How might this fail, right? What about different perspectives for different kinds of users and accessibility and all this kind of stuff? You bring different perspectives in there that help us refine that idea very early on so that we're not writing all those artifacts and requirements and then discovering, hey, there's a problem with the idea. How many people have done that, right? Very reactive. But also from that internal lens, being involved in things like A/B experimentation, and not just having a lens on the quality of the output of the experiment, but the quality of the experiment as well, which affects the output. Thinking about all those different variables that might affect your actual experiment, super valuable. And stretching to the right-hand side, making things easier for yourselves and your teams in terms of those processes for incident management and customer support and how that information feeds into the process sooner. Thinking about the observability side, the ops side. And then many of us are in a team and we're involved collaboratively around the agile processes that we work within. And there's now new roles around quality coaches and developer advocacy. And all of those tend to focus on that sort of team quality view. And a lot of us are stretching into those leadership levels as well, right? And lean on your CTO, lean on your COO as well, any sort of leaders that come from that developer or tester background. They've experienced it all, so they should know how to support in better ways and improve the org quality lens as well. And again, there's a view that we can have around bringing your skills, your lateral and critical thinking skills sooner, helps to prevent those problems later. And then also expanding your testing to include that sort of team quality and org quality view helps to improve the product holistically. So the last thing is around quality engineering. Is everyone familiar with this term, quality engineering? Yeah, it's becoming more prominent now. I think it's been around, I know I heard the term and started using it maybe 2016 maybe, but it's like anything in this industry. It goes through a big peak and then a big dip and then it starts to come back gradually as well. It's becoming more common now. Now, how I choose to define it, because like everything, there's different definitions that kick around. Like continuous testing has about 10 different definitions, but quality engineering, I'm thinking more from that verb perspective. So the noun is an engineer, right? The verb is to engineer, okay? So the way that I like to think about quality engineering is to engineer quality, right? And there's a definition. I'm not going to read it out. But and then there's another aspect to this slide, if you want to take pictures of this one, is that if you have testers on your team, you can also lean on that noun, evolve their role to be quality engineers. They have a lot of testing knowledge and skills, especially around that risk investigation. And a lot of them make good quality coaches holistically, and pushing them throughout the org can help everyone across the org as well. And then it'll help you grow those investigative skills from a development perspective as well. Okay, go forth and evolve quality throughout your organization and products. That's me. I think we've got a couple of minutes for questions, or we can go and get lunch sooner. Does anyone have any questions? Nope, nice. I'll vote for lunch early then. If you do have questions, I'm here for the rest of the conference as well, so just find me, reach out. Excellent, thank you.